Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ali's Take, back with another video here. Today we're going to be talking about something quite interesting, okay? And little spoiler here, it's definitely not the most relevant thing that we could be talking about right now. Obviously, we have things like the Champions League going on where, we have PSG and their performance, as well as some other teams who played. We could also be talking about, Mohamed Salah, because, there's the debate since he was the fastest, or the fifth fastest player to score 100 goals in the Premier League. Is he a striker? Is he a right winger? Is he better than Harry Kane? He's the best in the league. Stuff in those lines there. We could be speaking about that, but today we aren't. Okay, and the reason why is because we're going to be talking about a team that I think is quite interesting, and then I haven't heard anybody speak about them or make a certain video about them or bring anything up to light here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go over some things that I do find interesting and then give my take about them. So today we're going to be talking about Crystal Palace, okay? And I know they just won 3-0 over the weekend, so that's somewhat of the reason why I didn't want to talk about them, because I heard a weird stat that went around after the win. So they had about 60% possession for the full game here, and the last time that they did have that, okay, where they had more than 60% possession against, you can say, like a top 4 or top 6 team, was about December 2016. They looked very dominant against Tottenham Hotspurs, and the win was definitely deserving. So, but in terms of the start to their season, it hasn't been quite good. So I think that's why nobody really wants to talk about them yet. But potentially we could see something great in the making here. So we're just going to jump right into things. So with Crystal Palace here, over the summer, they lost their manager, Rob Hutchinson. He retired from managing football clubs, and then they brought in Patrick Vieira. Okay, and then so with Roy here, our boy Roy, he's quite an older gentleman. He has coached the most games with Crystal Palace, so he got appointed in about 2017, and he was in charge, until the end of the summer here. He ended up with a record of 54 wins and 72 losses. Like I said, this is the most capped he's ever been, so he played about 162 matches with about 36 draws. Okay, and then they brought in Patrick Vieira, which could potentially end up being a great signing. As we know, with players with coaches who actually played at a really high level, right? They could end up being very good or very bad, right? Like Koeman, for example, the Barcelona coach, as we know, I don't think he's very rated whatsoever, especially with the stories that come out with Pjanic talking about how bad of a manager that he actually is. Or you could end up with a player, with somebody like Pep Guardiola or Zidane, who've shown to be, some of the best managers of our time, right, of our decade. So, but besides that, like just jumping right into the club here, and what I found very interesting, the more you looked into them. But so if you look at somebody like Arsenal, for example, I think they had about 6 new signings, right, or 6 new faces to the club, and they spent about 182 million. And obviously, a lot of people talked about them just because of their start to the season and how poor it was. And those were a lot of players that came in, right? And they also had, basically a lot of players leave as well. But the one thing that nobody talks about with Crystal Palace, or nobody's kind of brought up to light here, but Crystal Palace actually had 8 new players come into their team. Okay, and I'm not too sure of a team that's brought in this many players into their team, and again, haven't loaned them out or anything like that. They brought in 8 new players. Obviously, some of the more famous ones we can say with Conor Gallagher from Chelsea, Mark Anichi from Chelsea as well, U23. They both played on the same team. Anderson, who played for Fulham but was on loan from Lyon, and then also Edouard from Celtic. Okay, so these are the more, I guess you can say, the more popular players, right? And they only spent about 80 million. Okay, so that's obviously not too bad as well. It seems great for them. But the one thing also to take into account is they had 12 departures. Okay, all free. They did not sell one player. Either these players didn't sign a new contract, or there wasn't, they weren't represented with a contract. So they had 12 departures as well. So they didn't make any money over the summer with any new signings. They basically just signed 8 players, They spent about 80 million. Obviously, some one was a free transfer and one was a loan, and then they had 12 people leave the club, which is pretty insane, honestly, and what I find super interesting as well. Okay, and if we go over some of the players here, so obviously we have Michael. We have Edouard here, the one player I wanted to talk about, because I think this is possibly their best signing. Best for them, I'm not too sure, but I think it's the best player that they signed. And the one thing to also bring in the light, and the reason why I wanted to talk about this as well, is because some of these players aren't just random players that were looking for a new club. Obviously, Edouard, coming from Celtic here, it's pretty well decorated, for his age at 23 years old. He's also been linked with Arsenal as well. He's been linked with Chelsea last year, Manchester United, Newcastle, Leicester City. And if we look at kind of what the stats here, like in terms of his whole career, he's played about 154 games at the center forward position. He scored about 77 goals with 35 assists. So altogether, what we're looking at is about 179 games for Celtic FC, 86 goals and 39 assists, which are pretty insane stats here. For somebody at 23 years old. And the one thing as well that we should be looking at is they signed 2 new center backs. So they obviously signed, Joachim Andersen, who, like I said, played for Fulham last year. Actually ended up with 9 clean sheets, which is not bad. It's not great, right? But it's definitely not bad. And again, why I think that's surprising here, because some of these players as well, especially with Andersen, he's also been linked with some of the bigger clubs in the top 6. None of them are have been linked to clubs like Bayern Munich or Real Madrid and PSG, but they've been linked with some of the bigger clubs in the Premier League, right? So like I was saying, like these players aren't just random signings that Crystal Palace got, especially Edouard here being so young. And honestly, he looks pretty damn good. I don't watch Celtic at all, so I can't really comment on how he actually plays, right, or how he looks when he plays. But my point is, like, these players could have gone to any of the bigger 6 teams, or any teams you could say are better than Crystal Palace. I mean, Crystal Palace finished 14th. And every single team that finished above them, I would say hands down was better than them last year for sure. So it's not like they got unlucky or anything like that. But these players ended up going to play under a new manager and under a club who potentially you wouldn't even consider in the middle of the table, right? So obviously that comes off as interesting to me, and why I could say we could see stuff potentially great in the making here. And obviously they signed a second center back from the Chelsea with Genichi here, who's also, I've watched some of his games watching the Chelsea U23s, and he was honestly pretty good. I don't want to boast him or gas him up here and say he's one of the best under 23 players I've ever seen, but these are young players under a brand new manager who, like I said, they could have really gone anywhere in the Premier League, but they ended up going to Crystal Palace here. So again, they are in 11th right now, and the reason why I bring this up is because, and why I think we potentially see something great in the making here, is not only are these players young and good and playing for a side like Crystal Palace, which gives them a lot more freedom to play, but with Patrick Vieira here, he really doesn't have any pressure at all. He's not, he doesn't have to win the Champions League. He doesn't, they're not expecting him to win the league. And in his managerial career, he's coached, Nice in League One here. Didn't have the best record with them. He still had a winning record. For the most part, he's had a winning record throughout his whole managerial career. So, he's coached New York, Man City's U19s and U21s. And then, before he came to Crystal Palace, he coached Nice with 35 wins, 21 draws, and 33 losses here. So, again, they're playing under, he has a young team. It looks like, honestly, almost like a brand new team, because most of these players do look like starters here. And he has a brand new manager with a brand new coaching style to bring into this. I know that he was helping out with the French U21s or U23s as well. Unfortunately, I can't find any information on how that record was. But from my understanding, they played a very attacking type of football, kind of like Bayern Munich, where the press is just relentless. And unfortunately, I don't have any of the stats here for that team. But like I was saying, he really doesn't have any pressure. They're not expecting him to win the Champions League. They're not expecting him to win the Premier League. So what we could potentially see here is, somebody with absolutely no pressure on him to play how he wants to play with the players that he wants to play with. And the reason why I bring this up is because watching them versus Tottenham Hotspurs, and Spurs aren't that bad of a team. Like, I'm not saying they're like Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, and United here, but the fact that they got this dominant win with some of these players, we could potentially see a brighter future. And I'm not saying these guys are going to go on to win the Premier League, but we could see a different team this year, which is great, obviously, for the league and for football in general. Like we watched West Ham last year. Like who would have thought that they would have been a team that got 5th place, especially with some of the players that they had. So I just wanted to bring this up to light, and I wanted to ask, kind of what you guys think here and what you think this means for Crystal Palace, because it's honestly super interesting when you look at it kind of from the outside in, because you have to wonder why some of these players who could have went to these bigger clubs went to this team under this brand new manager who doesn't really have kind of the credentials to be coaching or to bring a team to the top 4, top 6 yet. Right. But again, let me know what you guys think. It's kind of a shorter video today, definitely not as relevant, but it's something, like I said, very interesting to myself. And, if you find it interesting as well, definitely let me know, and let me know what you think of where Crystal Palace are going to finish and where they're going to finish, as long as or how well they're going to do with Patrick Vieira as their manager for, who knows how long he's going to be managing these guys. Right. But again, let me know what you guys think. Definitely leave a like below. And if you have, anything else to say, definitely leave it in the comment section there. But besides that, we'll see you next time.